Hello, and welcome to episode 23 of Sorastro's Star Wars painting series. In this episode, we're going to paint the Royal Guard Champion from Fantasy Flight Games' Star Wars Imperial Assault. Let's look at the painting stages. As always, we'll begin by priming the miniature, and either black or white would be fine for this. We'll then apply the base colours, followed by a dark wash for the purple areas as well as the handle of the weapon, but I'll be leaving the blades untouched for now. We can then highlight the red and purple clothes and armour. We'll then finish the figure off with some subtle shades and highlights for the blades, as well as a selective application of gloss varnish. Let's begin with the base colours. I'm going to begin by painting all of the purple areas with the Fang, darkened and desaturated with some black in a roughly 2:1 ratio. Although I will be using a red and purple colour scheme inspired by the wonderful character art for the figure, red and black would also be an effective and striking alternative that you might like to try. For the red areas, I'm using some Mephiston Red, darkened with some Calliban Green in a 3:1 ratio. We may have to get a little creative with our angle of approach to hit the hard to reach areas of the miniature. Next, I'm using some Ledbelcher for the twin-bladed weapon. I'm also going to provide a rough highlight to the shaft of the weapon with some Stormhost Silver. This will save us having to highlight the intricate texture later on, after the dark wash, which we'll be adding in a moment. Finally, we can paint the helmet visor with some pure black. And now we're ready to do some shading. I'm now going to create a dark purple mix using a combination of 2 parts Druchii Violet with 1 part Nuln Oil and 1 part Drakenhof Nightshade. We can then shade all of the purple areas with this. The only other area I've chosen to shade is the handle of the weapon, and for that we can use some straight Nuln Oil. I'm taking care to avoid the blades, however, as I have something else planned for them later on. Once the shades are dry, we're ready for the highlights. I'm going to begin by highlighting the areas of red, and I'll be using some Evil Sunz Scarlet, darkened with a little Calliban Green. This should only be a little lighter than the base colour, and we can use it to paint all of the flat areas of red. We should avoid places like the gaps between the stomach muscles and, if possible, the boundaries between the segments of the helmet. We can then mix in some additional Evil Sunz Scarlet and add our next layer of highlight. Although, if you want to save time, there would be nothing wrong with jumping straight to pure Evil Sunz Scarlet here if you wish. Now you can see that I'm focusing more on the upturned surface of the leg and bringing the highlight just halfway down, where I'm then feathering the boundary to create a smoother transition. You may notice I'm using a few more gradations of tone than when I painted the Royal Guard. This is simply because there is only one Royal Guard champion, so we can afford to invest a little more time in painting him. Next, we can use some pure Evil Sunz Scarlet. I'm now going to lighten this further by mixing in some Wild Rider Red. We're now really focusing on the most prominent areas of highlight. We can finish the red areas off with a few very small touches of pure Wild Rider Red. With the red areas complete, we can now turn our attention to the purple clothes and armour. To begin, I'm going to use a similar mix to the base tone, but with a little less black, so a ratio of around 3 parts the Fang to 1 part black should do. For the cloak, I'm brightening up the entire upturned lower portion, as well as the raised folds on the shoulders. We can now begin lightening the mix with the addition of some Warpfiend Grey in a couple of stages. I would like to now subtly differentiate the cloth-like textures from the harder plate-like sections of the outfit. To do this, I'm going to split the colour into two separate wells in the palette. Then, for the areas of fabric, I'm going to mix in a small amount of Yriel Yellow and provide one final highlight. For the armoured sections, such as the shoulder pads, breastplate, wrist and shin guards, I'm going to mix in a little Stormhost Silver. This introduces a subtle metallic reflectivity that will hopefully catch the light, giving the impression of a harder, shinier surface compared to the softer finish of the fabric. I've chosen to exaggerate the effect further by mixing in some additional silver. Once we're happy with the highlights, we're ready for some finishing touches. I'm now going to paint the blades of the weapon, beginning with a thin black glaze using a small dab of black and around 3 brushfuls of water. I'm then going to use this to gently shade the base of each blade, that is, the area closest to the weapon shaft. If your glaze is as thin as mine, it will take several layers before we start seeing the effect we're after, which is a gentle gradation of light at the tip of the blade to a darker area nearer the base. If you feel the glaze is too thin, you can of course add a touch more black to increase the concentration. Once we have enough of a gradation, we can then use a bright silver, such as Stormhost Silver, to add an edge highlight to the blades. Finally, to push the contrast a little further, we can thin the silver down and use it to gently brighten the lighter end of the flats of the blade. Here on the backs of the blades, you can see that I've chosen to reverse the effect. And now we can go ahead and paint or replace the base. Before varnishing, I've chosen to add one final optional touch to the blades, which is to apply a subtle glaze to the darkened areas using some thinned the Fang. This can be applied in a couple of thin layers and helps to add additional interest to the metal, but also to tie it in with the rest of the miniature. And finally, after a protective coat of matte varnish, we can apply some thinned gloss varnish to the armoured sections of the figure. And this completes the Royal Guard Champion. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you have enjoyed the video. If you do like the content, then do please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. As usual, my heartfelt thanks go out to the amazing patrons who are now funding all of the hours needed to produce these tutorials. Whilst my videos will always be free to watch, they are only made possible thanks to their ongoing generosity. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Star Wars Imperial Assault. Happy painting!